how many people we've got. I'm just checking with the numbers. Okay. This is also transmitted to YouTube channel, so everyone that wasn't able to join us on Zoom can check it up on Mix, which is Malopolska Institute of Culture YouTube channel. And I pass it now on to Susanne Urban, the host of today's meeting. And I will be back soon.
Thank you so much. So I don't want to add too many things what Tomasz said, but I'm really glad that we got such high guests, high-labeled, renowned guests with Pascale Falek and Dr. Pascale Falek and Dr. Felix Klein. I will introduce them before they will speak.
So everyone that wasn't able to join us on Zoom can check it up on Mix, which is Malopolska. I'm sorry, someone has a loudspeaker on.
No, it's you who was speaking.
No, okay. It's me.
It was like doubled, yes. I don't know. So
please just switch off the microphones for the moment. Yeah.
So I will introduce Tomasz Wlodarski. He's the Deputy Director of the Malopolska Institute of Culture in Krakow and has a philosophy graduate with experience in management. He worked for a local authority in the UK where he was engaged in support for planning and development of education of bilingual students and equality and diversity topics. In Poland, he co-organized and led a non-governmental organization offering legal assistance in the public interest, civil society, and environmental issues. At MIG, so the Malopolska Institute, he supports strategic planning, international cooperation, and accessibility projects, and is responsible for the program Malopolska Empathetic Culture that was awarded during the European Public Sector Awards in 2019, and he's a great colleague in Moreshet. So now Tom will introduce Moreshet, and then I will introduce our two honorable guests, Dr. Falek and Dr. Klein. Tom, it's your floor now.
Thank you, Susan. I'd like to shortly only describe our experiences in our network. Maybe some of you already had some opportunity to learn from us what Moreshet is. And for me, it's a quite unique experience since 2018. As it started in Malopolska Institute of Culture, where we are a public institution, first of all, responsible for development of culture sector in Malopolska region. And at some point, we've noticed that we don't do much about the Jewish heritage, which obviously is a huge heritage present in our region. So I tried to look closely into it, and it was actually quite a great coincidence because almost at the same time, there was a preparation for the Urban Jewish Heritage Conference that happened in Krakow in September 2018, funded by Europe for Citizens program. And I was able to meet Michael Mayo and his associates from University of Birmingham. And from that conference, I've met further members of Moreshet Network during the conference. We applied to Europe for Citizens programs as well, and we were supported with financing to initiate the network as the network of towns and network of regions, which was quite significant for us because it pushed us into the direction that we were focused on local authorities and approach that local authorities can take into dealing with Jewish heritage. But who is our premier member? I mean, the members that actually were engaged in the project. Obviously, it's the Foundation for Jewish Heritage from London. It's the municipality of Hijar, that is here presented by Lucia Conte. It's the Mantova, Jewish community from Mantova, and David that's here with us today. Also Schumstedt Association, which was with the presence of Susan Urban, And we also connected with Wrocław city, who unfortunately today was not able to join us. Jan Weiss, the deputy chair from the culture department from the city of Wrocław. And we initially focused on 5 topics, which were education and Jewish heritage, community engagement with a focus of engagement of youths, intangible heritage topic, adaptive reuse of former Jewish buildings, as well as quite important topic for Krakow, which is tourism and Jewish heritage. Some of the meetings we were able to meet personally, but then with the pandemic period, we were able to meet and organize meetings online. We engaged further 15 local authorities to join us. They expressed as well interest in joining the Moreshet network. But when we concluded the project, we were so happy to be together that we decided to really continue. And we had also this opportunity to use some funding last year to meet in Brussels to discuss the further development of the network and to meet some decision makers at the European level, Commission and Parliament level. We were discussing the publication of the EU strategy on anti-Semitism, combating anti-Semitism and fostering Jewish life, and how we can support the process of its implementation. So the decision was made during the last year that Moreshet network continues, that we want to still be together and engage people from different authorities across Europe to join us. And we want specifically focus in the nearest future on implementation of the strategy with a specific interest on education through the Jewish heritage, education through heritage. We also are interested in current topics of Jewish heritage in Ukraine. We are looking closely into it. We are making some connections, especially in Krakow. We've got some bigger Ukrainian communities that we are staying in touch with. So it is a topic that it's part of our interest, and we will be looking into it with a commitment to connect and engage with the local authorities to advise them, to help in dealing with the Jewish heritage topics, and also renovation and renovation of the Jewish heritage buildings or sites or intangible heritage topics as well. Thank you very much, and I'd like to pass the floor back to Susanne.
Thank you so much for introducing Moreshet. And I want to introduce now Dr. Pascale Falek as the next or the first speaker. She obtained a grade in contemporary history at the Université Libre de Bruxelles, a master in Jewish studies at Oxford University, a master in European studies in Warsaw, and a PhD in history and civilization at the European University Institute in Florence. Her thesis focused on East European female Jewish students in interwar Belgium. And for sure, she has published scientific papers, for example, in the Cahiers du Judaïsme and the Journal of Jewish Identities. Since September 2011, she worked for the Belgian State Archives on the archival guide on Judaism and the Jewish populations in Belgium in the 19th and 20th centuries. 2014 to 2018, she was curator, and between 2018 and 2020, director of the Jewish Museum in Belgium. Since then, she's policy officer and part of the team in the EU coordinating group combating anti-Semitism. Dr. Falek has an intensive expertise in the cultural sector and questions related to gender, education, minorities and migration, intercultural relations, inclusion and diversity. Pascale, thank you so much for joining us and presenting the EU strategy combating anti-Semitism and fostering Jewish life and its possible impact on projects, the EU and education. And now the floor is yours. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Susanne. Good afternoon, good evening, everyone. I'm very pleased to be here today, and I'm very pleased to thank you for organizing this meeting. And as a follow-up, as Tomasz said, of the meeting we had in person a couple of months ago in Brussels. So I will start. I have about 15 minutes, and I will present the strategy, but also its implementation today. So. As you all know, anti-Semitism is still on the rise today. The European Commission stands firmly against all forms of anti-Semitism. Today, contemporary anti-Semitism can be found in radical and fringe groups espousing right-wing, left-wing, or Islamist extremism, but also it can be found in the very center of society. Manifestations of anti-Semitism might also include Israel-related anti-Semitism, which is today the most common form of anti-Semitism encountered by Jews online in Europe. Anti-Semitism is totally incompatible with Europe's core values and the principles on which the EU is funded. And the Commission actively fights against all forms of racism and xenophobia, including anti-Semitism, in line with the powers conferred on it by the treaties. Rising anti-Semitism across Europe is a threat not only to Jewish communities, but to European societies as a whole. It's just not for Jews to fight against it. It's really important that it's a societal, that the societal dimension is for all of us to do it. And because it is against our values, because it is toxic for the democracies and our European way of life. Today we see some progresses, but also some challenges. And I will start with the progresses. So the Commission has adopted, as you know, its first, you probably see it, its first ever strategy, EU strategy on combating anti-Semitism and fostering Jewish life in October 2021. The strategy has been welcomed by all EU member states who committed in the 2022 Council conclusions on combating racism and anti-Semitism to adopt national strategies on anti-Semitism by end 2022. And that's how we will have the presentation of one of them, thanks to Dr. Felix Klein, who will present it just afterwards. The Commission will in 2024 publish an implementation report on the EU strategy, which will include also the monitoring of progresses made at national level. The Fundamental Rights Agency, the FRA, annual overview published in November 2022 has shown that so when they collected the data, 14 member states have adopted a national strategy against anti-Semitism, and another 8 indicated that a strategy is under development. So in that case, I think Germany is in these 8. We expect even a few more member states to develop a strategy in the coming months. And these strategies can be either standalone strategies against solely anti-Semitism, or measures taken as part of a broader strategies against racism and extremism in general. And in the last months, we were really pleased to see Germany, France, and even lastly, Spain adopting their national strategies. Others have taken the pen, currently finalizing their plans, and we are really looking very soon to welcome the strategies from the Netherlands and Hungary, notably. Go to the state of play of the implementation. This strategy foresees targeted actions across 3 pillars and seeks to place the EU firmly in the lead of the global fight against anti-Semitism. It's complementing the measures within the EU with international efforts along the 3 pillars. Pillar 1, preventing and combating all forms of anti-Semitism. Pillar 2, protecting and fostering Jewish life in the EU. Pillar 3, which is the one that may interest you the more in the field, it's education, research, and Holocaust remembrance. The EU strategy includes around 95 actions, of which in the first, now we are in the second year, 55 have been set in motion. And I will try to cover some of them, focusing specifically on the second and third pillar for this presentation. So it's not exhaustive. As part of the strategy, we gather notably twice per year representatives of all EU member states and representatives of European Jewish communities. The next meeting of this EC working group on the implementation of the EU strategy will take place in Bucharest in early May. And it's also the place to address issues related to education, cultural heritage, and there will be also a specific focus this time, specifically on Ukraine and Moldova. Other type of action initiated by Austria in cooperation with the Fundamental Rights Agency and the Commission. 11 EU member states signed the Vienna Declaration last May to commit to develop common methodology on recording anti-Semitic incidents. And that's extremely important, as you know that for now, data collection of anti-Semitic incidents in the EU are not harmonized. And we also need to develop the reporting and collecting of data anti-Semitic incidents online. And I'm pretty sure that Mr. Klein will come in also on the online recording, since Germany is really advanced on this issue. Regarding the recording of incidents, I don't know if you're aware, currently the FRAS, so the Fundamental Rights Agency, has a survey, is surveying anti-Semitic perception of anti-Semitism, among Jewish population in 13 EU member states. The survey is open to be filled in until the end of April, and we strongly encourage those who are who identify as Jews, or who know any Jewish members in their member country, to spread the word and to share the form, because it's really important that we have a high reach regarding population complete, so that we can make policy. We say it's 20 minutes filling this form to change 5 years of policy work. I'm going now, after the recording of incidents and your help on that part, to Jewish life. A key issue for Jewish community is the possibility for Jews to practice their religion, including by having access to kosher food. We know that it's particularly a sensitive and complicated issue today. There were some potential bans, transfer potential bans in some kind of ritual slaughter in some countries, and also even just the discussion about it reinforce the perception that members of religious minority groups are unwelcome in those countries. So to address this issue, the Commission has organized in Brussels in October 2022 a conference entitled Freedom of Religion with regard to religious slaughter, in partnership with several international organizations, the UN, and it's facilitating the exchange of good practice between EU member states, national authorities, and religious communities. And last month, Finland has chosen not to ban religious slaughter, to allow freedom to practice religion for its religious minorities. So we see that some of the actions have really some concrete results. Another action of the strategy was to encourage more to engage more with civil society. So to this end, we have organized last year the first ever civil society forum on combating anti-Semitism and fostering Jewish life. It took place in November 2022. It gathered around 200 participants. We also had workshops specifically on Jewish life, on Jewish culture and heritage. And we will organize it again in 2024, and we'll be very pleased to have all of you, or some of you at least, participating to this really, big exchange on specific topics, all topics based from online hate speech to cultural heritage to recording of incidents, just in this like a huge forum taking place in Brussels. At this forum, we have launched an initiative of the strategy entitled Network of Young European Ambassadors to Promote Holocaust Remembrance. This was part of the 2022 European Year of Youth, and the network will aim to have a digital and a physical component. Indeed, we know today that Holocaust survivors recalling their stories have been the best vaccine against anti-Semitism, against fueling hatred. And as the last survivors of the Holocaust are passing away, we must find new ways of remembrance. And it is even more crucial as our societies are becoming more diverse, as young people have less attention span, and that we know that those survivors are leaving us. Despite the Holocaust being commemorated and taught in many EU countries, a lack of knowledge still exists among the general public. One action of the strategy, a new one to be developed, is to build a participatory Holocaust memorial in Brussels. So a participatory Holocaust monument that will be held in Brussels with other monuments, or at least, no, to say that, with bases in the different member states, in all the capitals, basically. To start this process, a dozen of EU representations have held commemorative events and reflect on the concept of European remembrance last January. And we are discussing now also with the IRA experts how to develop it. We're discussing with different experts in the field of arts, but it's really also to continue to have this, both the reflection on the concept and then the artwork and the memorial coming in. Another action also on the Holocaust remembrance is to create a network of sites where the Holocaust happened, which might be extremely relevant for you. Sites such as hiding places, deportation places, killing sites from all over Europe. We want to strengthen the connections and the international cooperation between those Holocaust sites. We also work closely with the IRA on this project, but you may hear again about it in the coming months, and we may have to discuss also to what extent how many sites will be considered when the Holocaust happened locally, and in some countries it's almost in every street that something has happened. So how to mark it and how to make sense about it, it's under reflection. Holocaust remembrance is today an EU funding priority through the remembrance strands of the SERV program, so the Citizens, Equality, Remembrance and Values program. With a dedicated budget of 10 million euros for 2023. The call is, as you know, currently open, and we invite you to apply. It will close in June. Another call that also might be relevant for you is the Equal call from the SERV program, and the deadline is, again, also in June this year. Among the numerous initiatives that were funded and started, the project that started in January 2023, is notably the European Days of Jewish Culture that you may all know, with around 400,000 euros. So it's the first time it's funded through the SERV program. And the Commission has been funding, as you probably also know, other projects on culture, on cultural heritage, such as the Jewish Digital Cultural Recovery Project, which develops a comprehensive database of information on Jewish-owned cultural assets that were plundered by the Nazis. We also pursue the work done to protect Jewish cemeteries of Europe, capitalizing on the results of the two previous European Parliament pilot projects. Jewish heritage is really an integral part of European culture. And that's something that you may probably not know, but the EU also funds and promotes Jewish heritage in the neighborhood countries. And there were two projects for which funding have been allocated that will be starting very soon. One in Sarajevo, so the EU will fund and will contribute to the funding given to the Jewish Museum of Sarajevo. And so the main synagogue, for those who have been there, is like a huge, massive, terrific synagogue that is turned into a museum. And also in Morocco, which like cultural heritage in Morocco will be protected and promoted with EU funding as part of the neighborhood policy. To give you some other news, tomorrow we will publish a report written by Dr. Jonathan Boyd and Dr. Kate Kahn-Harris from the GPR Institute on the field of research on contemporary anti-Semitism and Jewish life. So as you may know, as one of the actions of the strategy is to establish a research hub, a EU research hub on contemporary anti-Semitism. Today you have research done on contemporary anti-Semitism mostly in the US, in Israel, in Canada, but there is no central hub in Europe. So the idea was first to really map what is at stake in the fields of contemporary anti-Semitism and Jewish life in the field of research. Now that we have this report published tomorrow, we'll continue the work and with the research community and with the aim to create a real research hub. And another action that I wanted to mention that will be launched on Monday, April 3rd, is a new 2-year project financed by Erasmus Plus program, implemented by UNESCO in partnership with ODIHR to address anti-Semitism in Europe through education. So they will work through tailored activities with national authorities of 13 EU member states, with to develop them to help them to develop their educational dimension of their national plans on combating anti-Semitism, with tailor-made workshops in person in these 13 member states. And there will be also online workshops and online activities for teachers from all over Europe that will be proposed. To conclude, combating anti-Semitism in the EU is a shared responsibility. It requires joint efforts and action at every level, EU institution and EU level, European Parliament, national governments, but also Jewish organizations, civil society organizations, fundamental rights organizations. We all have a role to play in it, and we count on continue to engage with civil society, with you as experts in your fields, to work together on this endeavor, to join forces. Europe can only prosper when its Jewish communities prosper too. I thank you for your attention, and I pass by the floor. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Pascale. This was really innovative and inspiring. So let's start to work. But first we listen to Dr. Felix Klein, who has been the federal government commissioner for Jewish life in Germany and the fight against anti-Semitism since May 2018. He studied law in Freiburg and Berlin and completed a master's degree at the London School of Economics, from which he graduated with a Master of Public International Law. Then he completed training for the Higher Foreign Service in Bonn, and in 2001 he received his doctorate from the University of St. Gallen, so everything throughout Europe, with a thesis on family law. He began his diplomatic career in South America, held posts in Cameroon and Milan, and from 2007 to 2018, he was in several positions at the Berlin headquarters of the German Foreign Office, most recently as special representative for relations with Jewish organizations and anti-Semitism issues, from which he went further on. And Dr. Felix Klein is deeply interested in, and I have to add this, and attached to classical music. He has been active as a violinist since childhood and has played in numerous chamber music ensembles and orchestras. And he is currently a member of the, I think it's very unique, Diplomatic String Quartet Berlin, which is dedicated primarily to the works of Jewish composers. And I have already had the pleasure of hearing him play. So you have the floor, not with your violin today, but with the German strategy against on combating anti-Semitism and fostering Jewish life, which was on a high speed, somehow like implemented in November 2022. Thank you very much, Mr. Klein.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much for inviting me, for giving me the opportunity to present myself and the national strategy we, you said it, adopted in November last year in Berlin. I was very happy to have Katharina von Schnurbein next to me, also presenting it. Also, we wanted to make it clear with this presence of Katharina that with our national strategy, we wanted to fit in to the EU strategy, which was presented in October 2021. And we had a really fantastic cooperation, not only in this field, but also in many others. Pascale, you mentioned some of our activities, for instance, trying to persuade the Finnish politicians not to ban kosher slaughtering, for instance, is something I think that without the Commission and its activities and joint efforts from many other EU member countries, we wouldn't have had. So thank you for this. The strategy represents actually a real milestone for us in Germany in the fight against anti-Semitism. It's the first ever strategy Germany adopted. Before presenting it, I would like to point out, of course, it has been said, anti-Semitism is considered the oldest form of resentment, the oldest hatred in Europe. But the Shoah, the murder on an industrial scale, which annihilated almost the entirety of European Jewry, was Germany's doing, and particularly in Poland, of course. You will see the devastating effects that had. I don't have to expand on that. It's obvious. So this is why, of course, as Germans, we have and hold a particular responsibility for fighting anti-Semitism. And although anti-Jewish hatred is currently on the rise in many countries, as Pascale pointed out, not just in Germany, but this troubling trend has additional meaning in Germany. Our responsibility means not only remembering the victims of the Nazi regime and keeping the memory of the Nazis' crimes alive, but it also means that we have a responsibility to fight anti-Semitism resolutely here and now, and to prevent it wherever possible. And also what I would like to point out is, of course, we didn't start from nowhere, from scratch, of course. Susanne Urban, you said I was appointed more than 5 years ago, almost 5 years ago. When I took office, I immediately saw the need that we have to create structures in the fight against anti-Semitism to face it more strategically. And as you might know, of course, Germany is a federal country. So in our case, one of the first things I called for with success is the foundation of a joint federal and state commission on anti-Semitism commissioners of the Bundesländer of the 16 federal states, because in Germany, some 80% of all measures that can be taken to fight anti-Semitism fall under the jurisdiction of the state level in Germany's federal government system. For examples, measures in the areas of education, culture, justice system, and law enforcement. So, and this is important. This is also the experience we took from that. Were very productive in the formulation of our national strategy against anti-Semitism. And in the past years, we really managed to create throughout Germany structures. For instance, in every public prosecutor's office in Germany, we have now installed anti-Semitism commissioners, and a lot of progress also been made in some major companies and even in football clubs. The adoption of the IRA working definition of anti-Semitism by football clubs, by companies, has raised the awareness in the general public towards the fight against anti-Semitism and the phenomenon itself, because recognizing anti-Semitism in its old and new forms is key for being able to tackle it. So our national strategy provides help and guidance for doing so. It is innovative in two ways. First, in its streamlined, compact format. As Pascale pointed out, also here I would point out it's not too thick. Actually, it's about 40 pages maximum, with some pictures. So also there we were inspired by the EU example, because if you produce a document that's too long, nobody will read it. The English version can also be downloaded from my website. With a few clicks, you can have it, and this is I think very, very good. So it's not too long, and it is innovative in two ways. Well, I said one, it has a compact format, but second, in its focus, it is more than just, it addresses not only the political or administrative or educational level, it is addressing all of society. It can be applied at every level of government and society. It serves as a model and a tool for assessing the effectiveness also of current measures and adjusting them if necessary. It should help us to answer the questions: are we doing enough to fight anti-Semitism? And if not, what needs to be done and how should we approach it? Be it as the federal government, but also as, for example, as a civic organization, a sports club, or a company. So our national strategy provides a matrix of 5 action areas to answer these questions, and 3 cross-sectional dimensions. And the objects of the 5 areas of action are all interconnected. So what do I mean with the cross-sectional dimensions? These dimensions are, first, in every measure we take into account in the fight against anti-Semitism, the perspective of those affected by anti-Semitism must be included systematically. So if you provide measures in education or punishment of anti-Semitism, the perspective of those concerned must be taken into account. So that's across sectional dimension. The second is the creation of structures so that approaches can be made permanent. You know, when I'm not there anymore, someone will replace me, and so it doesn't matter what Felix Klein is doing, but we have to create structures in the fight against anti-Semitism. And third, of course, this is self-explanatory, the digital RAM as a cornerstone of our interlinked society has to be taken into account. Anti-Semitism expresses itself in the internet and social media, that's clear. So what are our action areas we've identified in our strategy? The first is, and Pascale also mentioned it, of course, the data collection, research and situation report that looks at what kind of information on anti-Semitism is available and how we can improve, expand and share this knowledge. It asks, are we listening enough to Jewish voices and are we including them into dialogue formats? Are we doing enough to build networks? Because we of course, if you want to fight anti-Semitism, first you have to know what are we talking about at all. So this is important, of course. Second action area is education to prevent anti-Semitism. This focuses on sharing this knowledge. Public awareness of anti-Semitism should be raised in a broad-ranging way with messaging tailored to specific groups. And this awareness raising should take place in many different life phases. So when we talk about anti-Semitism and education, we should not only focus schools, but also, for instance, vocational training and higher education, for instance, in working environments. For example, greater awareness of anti-Jewish hatred and the history of the Shoah can be conveyed in businesses as well as in training for public service of occupations, for instance. So that's important. Third area of action is called culture of remembrance, historical awareness and commemoration. Of course, critical awareness of history is the foundation for keeping memory alive. This area is also devoted to honoring, of course, the memory of the victims of National Socialism. And in that respect, it's just as important for a school to plan its approach to remembrance and commemoration as it is, for instance, for federal authorities or businesses or even the fire brigades. You know, everybody can engage in remembrance culture. This is what our third action area would like to point out. The fourth action area, we called it punitive measures and security. It looks at how we should respond to anti-Semitic acts and how to ensure freedom and security for all. So, of course, this is addressed to the judiciary and the police, but not only there. A football club has to react when, for instance, the Hitler salute is shown in a football stadium. Then the football club has to decide, should we ban this person for the rest of his life from the stadium? Or can we talk to this person? What can we do? So this is very important as for the police, but as it is for civil society. And the fifth action area we called Jewish history and Jewish life. Today, this focuses on empowering the Jewish community and making it more visible. Supporting the Jewish community and facilitating interaction with its lived reality today can be carried out just as well by a youth club, also a non-Jewish youth club, for example, as by a government organization. And I think it's particularly interesting, I think, for your institution, action field 3 and 5, I just mentioned. This is very important, and I'm looking forward also to question and answer session, then we can look how we can intertwined. I want also to find out the process leading to our national strategy included more than 40 Jewish and non-Jewish society organizations That was very important. And of course, we consistently included the perspectives of Jewish people. And that was very interesting. Pascale already pointed out that the EU Commission will evaluate and monitor, well, first monitor, then evaluate the national strategies. I'm really looking forward to this process. And in the EU working group, you mentioned, Pascale, already, we talk about this process. This is really a very good and fruitful process, I think. And what is a great pleasure for me, actually, that we generated a great interest in our national strategy. For instance, in the United States, Katharina, myself, and other commissioners were invited to the White House to give our expertise, our advice, what the US should do. They are working now on a so-called national US action plan for the fight against anti-Semitism. And Katharina, myself, and other colleagues, we were asked what should be included, to our view, into this national US strategy. And if you think, it's amazing that the Americans are asking us Europeans how to tackle and to approach the fight against anti-Semitism in a more strategic way. I think 5 years ago, when I was appointed, I would have never dreamt of something like this. So this is really good, and also I think the public awareness about anti-Semitism has risen. We should continue in this process, and I'm very happy that we are here amongst allies, that we are all working on this task. Thank you very much for your attention, and looking forward to the discussion.
Thank you so much, Mr. Klein, and I will hand over the forthcoming moderation and introduction to Michael Mayle, founder and CEO of the Foundation for Jewish Heritage, based in UK, and our important and motivating partner in Moreshet.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Susanne, and thank you for two excellent presentations. And I think we all, I think it's so important that the EU has taken this lead, and Germany has taken this lead in addressing the scourge of anti-Semitism, which we know is so important for the Jewish community and for Jewish life in Europe, but also for wider European society as we seek to bolster what we now talk about today is representing the European values of tolerance, openness, diversity, human rights, democracy, etc. And so we've got a certain amount of time to address questions from the floor. We've put aside 15 minutes for that. So I now invite everyone present, all those who have joined us, to either raise their hands or put questions in the chat that we will pick up and then put to either Pascale or Felix, or indeed both. So I don't know. Maybe I'll kick off and ask a question. Can I ask you, just in terms of the time frame of this, what, both in the context of the EU and the national context of Germany, how long do we think this will go? And, there's always that question of, what happens when the funding ends? It's a classic question. And how do we, do we feel that we can kind of structurally change things that will ensure that there will be continuity, and that addressing this agenda becomes embedded in the frameworks of the EU and the frameworks of Germany? So if I could put that to both of you. Who wants to go first? Pascale, you go first.
I can go first. Thank you, Michael, and thank you, Dr. Klein, for, I need first to mention also that we can't, we have been working together. Felix Klein has come to Brussels for this conference on freedom of religion and to different events, and it's very important to have this partnership. And it's also, this is, as you mentioned, like the time frame and how we put it in structures. It's also by establishing this strong network of special envoys to have, and it's really clearly set up in the strategy, in the EU strategy, that the Commission is encouraging all member states to appoint a national coordinator, special envoy, or it depends on who you form it, to have a national strategy, to adopt the IRA definition. And it's, as Felix Klein said, even if I'm not there, it will continue because there is a strategic plan with a time frame, because there is a structure in place. This EU strategy goes until 2030. So it's a 10 years plan. And it was very important for us to make sure it goes not only within this mandate of the Commission. As you know, we have election next year, and everything can be reshuffled after the election, like in all elections. But basically, just it was important strategically when we establish a strategy to have it at a long time frame. And by then, we really hope that the structure will be in place, that national coordinators will be appointed in all countries with mechanism, and that the question, also the issue, will be mainstream across all policy areas.
Okay, that's great. And Felix, would you also like to comment?
Yeah, well, the establishment of the networks is something which will last. Yeah, of course, we started with it, and I think EU working group, the network of coordinators, that will last as our standing commission, federal and state commission. I suggested it was the decision to establish that commission was taken by Chancellor Merkel and the 16 prime ministers of the German states, and that's a decision that will its effect will last until further notice. So I think there I think we are very on a good path with that, to have it more strategically. Second question, of course, is the funding. That's more complicated, of course, because funding expires. You know, when the budget is over, you need to find new funds, new structures. But I think in the fight against anti-Semitism, we see the concrete effects of what NGOs can do in the field, particularly of, for instance, remembrance culture. That's fantastic, because there we have the possibility to involve civil society, schools, etc. In that, and the relationship between the money spent and the effect you have is very good, very positive. So I'm optimistic that we will also get funding also well on the European level with the next commission, but also on the national level. And here I can report that here in Germany we are working on a law which is entitled the law to foster democracy, which is currently negotiated in Parliament. And if that law was passed, then NGOs that engage in the field in the fight against anti-Semitism, but also fight against racism and other forms of discrimination, they will get a very much more reliable way to get funding. Because I don't know what, in many of your institutions, it's really problematic that you spend so much time on the question, where do we get our funding from? And you should rather focus on the actual topic you're pursuing. And that's the idea of that law. Of course, we have difficult times in finding money for this kind of activities, and we have the war between Russia and Ukraine, and European support for Ukraine, etc., and the effects of COVID-19. So it's more difficult to get to look for money, but I'm optimistic that we will be able to set up also financial structures that will last.
Yeah, awesome. And in some ways, it's, thinking the kind of irony that the one level we want a kind of step change, and that we want this to have a higher priority and to somehow become embedded in the system. Of course, the aspiration is that anti-Semitism in due course will decline, and therefore this will be less of an urgent issue within European societies. We've kind of got this dichotomy. Let me call upon Peter Puchta, our colleague from Poland, from FOJ, would like to ask a question. So, Peter, if you can unmute yourself.
Yes, I believe I'm already unmuted. So
yes, we can hear you, Peter. We can hear you.
First of all, I would like to use this opportunity to express my appreciation for the organizer of today's meeting. I believe that this topic that you are raising today about the EU strategy and national strategies is very important, especially for Poland, since as far as I understand, we have not formulated our national strategy yet, and I'm personally awaiting to hear about steps that will be leading to the first formulation and then publishing of the national Polish strategy to fight anti-Semitism and foster Jewish life. And my question to the participants, especially to Pascale, is whether you know which institutions of central governments in each member state are responsible for developing such strategies. I understand that in case of Germany, the coordinator of this is Mr. Klein and his team, but in other member states that do not have such individual members of government in their structure, where is the responsibility lying? I would like to ask for your information and experience in this issue.
Thank you very much, Mr. Purta. It's a good question indeed, and it shows also the diversity of the question of how the issue is addressed and tackled in the 27 EU member states. So in some countries, the Ministry of Internal Affairs is taking the lead. In other countries, it's directly under the Prime Minister office. In others, it's more on education. In some, even in Hungary, it's some with the Foreign Affairs. So it really depends of the country. In some, it's the Justice Department. So it depends of the in each country. The coordinator, if there is one appointed, is attached to another ministry, and it's for each country to decide how they do it. But for Poland, as you mentioned, indeed, they do not have a plan yet. I met yesterday. I had a chance to address the issue with Piotr Gliński, Deputy Prime Minister and Minister for Culture. He did not answer my question. I mean, I said that I would welcome to see the plan being presented. And as you know, the country government, the party and the government, the peace, they have a specific view on the issue, and they strongly believe that they do a lot on anti-Semitism and on Holocaust remembrance. If you listen to their discourse, they even made, and it's a public event, so I can refer to what they said yesterday. So Mr. Gliński said yesterday that the record of incidents in Poland show that they have less anti-Semitic incidents in Poland than in Germany. And the points. Hungary will adopt a strategy. They say they will adopt a strategy very soon, that it's almost ready, or at least there is a first draft that is ready. Then the question will be also to see what is in it.
So Pascale, in terms of Poland, so the response was it's unnecessary. So there was no commitment.
No, he did not answer. No. So Poland officially committed to adopt a national plan.
Oh, right, okay.
All member states in the Council conclusions of 4 March 2022, all member states committed to adopt a national plan by end 2022. We are in 2023. So they committed several times to have it officially.
Yes, but okay, but they're, what should we say, prevaricating might be a nice way of saying, or they're reflecting.
But then also the question will be what they will put in it.
Yes.
If I can maybe add something, because Piotr Gliński is the Minister of Culture, and after our meeting in December, I've tried to work a little bit on to find out who is responsible for this, and to contact and actually it's Minister of Foreign Affairs responsible for drafting the national plan. That's how it was presented to me. That's the part of it. Is the Department of Cultural Policies, I think, and Mr. Grzegorz Jobkiewicz in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. So I assume that Mr. Piotr Bliński, who is the Minister of Culture, may even not be much knowledgeable about the developments, and his comments were just based on his own idea and of the topic. But we are trying hard to contact the ministry. We obviously now we need to do it by sending letters. But I've got some development with the help of our friends from the Galicia Museum that soon maybe we'll find a little bit more, because they have some more personal contact with the people responsible. So afterwards, maybe I can contact Mr. Piotr Puchta as well and try to form a lobbying group in Poland to at least to find out what's going to be in the strategy, or at least a part of it. Also, once we joined the working group, because we were invited to present Moreshet there, also I was able to listen to the presentation from Fra, and I think I had an impression, at least, that Poland is planning to make it part of the wider strategy fighting racism. But I think it's only declaration, and we don't know still what's part of it.
Another interesting aspect of this, just think about it, will be, to what extent countries, should we say, present what they're already doing. Obviously that's legitimate to present what's already been done, but of course we're looking for new initiatives, and Felix has presented exactly how Germany is addressing this. And it'll be very interesting to look at all the countries and assess to what extent more resources are being put into this, as opposed to simply repackaging existing schemes. Now, Thomas, did you want to ask a question? Thomas, did you want to? Yes.
There is a question actually from Susanne, and Susanne, would you like to point it out yourself, or has it been answered? Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. No, I was thinking regarding Hungary, because they have a rise in anti-Semitism. They have somehow like a tendency by the government on detaching from democratic values and therefore also European values. But they create a strategy against anti-Semitism and fostering Jewish life. How can we cope with this ambiguity, and how can we cope with this somehow like it's really a tension, and I think it's very hard to harmonize it somehow. And it's not the only European country which is somehow like a little bit
getting conflicting messages coming out of certain governments.
Thank you, Mike. This was diplomatic, which totally lacks my character.
So I don't know, Pascale, if you want to comment, or Felix, if you want to comment on that.
I think Pascale should. We have bilateral problems also with the Hungarians, but maybe Pascale knows the recipe.
The recipe, I don't know, adopt. The case of Hungary is particular. As you know, they put quite a lot of funding on Jewish heritage recently. Yes. The Jewish community, the Jewish life in Budapest, at least, is vivid, flourishing. There's a lot of things going on there. They don't seem to have the same security issues, at least on Jewish life, like synagogue, what you can organize Jewish festivals, etc., that in other countries. And as you may know, the government decided to privilege or to find some as main interlocutors, some parts of the Jewish leadership and not the others. So it also creates tension among the Jewish community. We'll see the developments. As I mentioned before, there will be an action plan that will be presented by Hungary. Will we also see what's in it and not only predict? But it is a particular case, and it's not for nothing. That the EU went to with infringement and reduction of EU funds based on Article 7 for a breach of EU law. So,
may I just add a small question or thought. Do you think it's possible that through these action plans or strategies that you can somehow, like, again, attach much more European values or bring back European values? Do you think it's possible?
So it's supposed to be part. I mean, we will monitor, as Felix said, the Commission will monitor what's in the strategies. That will be the next step. But indeed, those cases, I mean, Hungary and probably Poland, it's complicated. Also from the start, as you see, I mean, you are saying there is a rise in anti-Semitism in the country. They argue the contrary. Then we go back to the recording of incidents.
Yes. And as you were saying earlier, Pascale, we've got this situation where actually in Hungary, in some ways, there's been a lot of investment from the government into preserving Jewish heritage and to presenting the Jewish story. So yeah, it is, you know, there are different aspects to this. It's tricky, but of course you're trying to move forward in a consensual way, recognizing that everyone has formally signed up to this initiative and are committed to implementing the program, and that's what we're now looking for. I'm conscious of the time. We're now
just Michael. Sorry, I just wanted to make a small comment still at this point, and I think Mrs. Falek wants raised her hand, isn't it? Yeah. I mean, two small comments. I mean, obviously, and I'm quite aware that in Poland we have quite a topic of anti-Semitism, but also I think there is a lot of people committed to work on Jewish heritage, because we are quite aware that Jewish heritage has been somehow repressed in our community for the manifold reasons, also because of the atrocities that happened in the past. And what I'd like to somehow, I mean, it's thank you, but also I appreciate the fact that in the German strategy, the position of culture is quite high. I mean, and for some reason it's quite obvious, because we are talking about the community, we are talking about the history, but on the other hand, I have an impression as well that we are talking about the strategy of fighting anti-Semitism. We talk a lot about the forces of punitive measures and that sort of stuff. But I'm quite happy that the culture and the community and the history is there. And I think at some point, we in Poland have an advantage of having strong cultural institutions. I mean, me personally, I'm representing cultural institution, and each municipality in Poland by law has to have a cultural institution. And this is quite a potential, I think, to work on the history, to work on heritage, and make a change, make an impact by using education through heritage. So I think this is something that will going to happen somehow. At least will be pushed by some of the networks of cultural institutions. It would be great if it would be part of the strategy, because it would be really using a tool that it is in Polish law, that it is in Polish infrastructure of public sector, to really address anti-Semitism and to promote Jewish life, or at least promote remembrance of Jewish heritage in a positive way. So I think still there is a big potential. Obviously, we need to overcome some problems with getting this message up. If it's a problem, we will do, at least in our region, whatever we can to push it forward. And using Moreshet network, we will try to as well express it in other committees and groups.
The idea, Tom, is that that we're changing the environment, or promoting a certain environment within the EU that will support all sorts of efforts that are being done locally and regionally to address the subject. So I think that's the driving mission of what this initiative is all about. Okay, well, look, I think we will now bring that to a close. I mean, I think it's been absolutely fascinating to listen to the both of you. We're so grateful to you, Pascale, and to you, Felix. I mean, I thought it's just very interesting to think at the kind of macro EU level, Pascale, what you presented, and then to look at it from a country perspective, in particular a country like Germany, where we know it resonates so strongly. So we're very grateful to you and very encouraged by what we've heard about this very important initiative for Europe, for the Jewish community, and indeed for Moreshet, and as we address how we can make our own contribution to ensure that this agenda is delivered. We're now going to move on to 2 case studies and talking specifically around implementing Jewish heritage preservation projects. The first one is going to be presented by Susanne, and I will just quickly introduce her. So Susanne has been the head of reporting and information in the Antisemitism office in Hessen, which is part of the University of Marburg. Prior to that, she was managing director for the Shum Cities Association, and therefore part of the team that successfully achieved the inscription of the Shum sites into the UNESCO World Heritage List. And this was hugely significant because it was the first time that an exclusively Jewish site had been recognized through the UNESCO listing. And prior to that, she was head of historical research and education at the International Tracing Service, the Arlsen Archives in Germany, and she's researched and published extensively on a range of topics. Susanne, I will hand over to you.
So do you see the PowerPoint? Then I'm glad and happy. So yes, it will be a tour de force that can only touch upon the huge complex of education and ideas on how to promote Jewish heritage. So first of all, what is Jewish heritage? It's places, it's tangible spaces, it's tangible places, but it's also the spaces. So it's somehow like memory and intangible heritage, which also creates the space around the place. Many of these Jewish heritage places are post-Shoah, and they are partly post-Jewish because in parts of Europe and parts of Germany where you have Jewish heritage, there are no Jewish communities anymore. So we have to think about how to promote, how to share these Jewish heritage places and the intangible heritage, and how we can somehow like develop the stories there, and how we can promote Jewish life, which was there and perhaps is there or perhaps will be there sometimes again. So we think that constant education is one really important thing. So start early and implement an interest and somehow like trigger an interest and kindle the flame, not to let it out. And what we also think we need authentic images, so not to create stories, but to tell stories which are true, which were there, and which you can share there. To tell these stories, and it's also about creating crossroads of cultural spaces, because Jewish history, Jewish life was always somehow like exchanging with a majority society, with a majority culture, etc. And which is also, or what is also important, is to connect people to these places and to make them feel responsible for these places. And this also mirrors the diverse societies and multiple experiences and backgrounds, which you can find in the places, but which you will also find in the people whom you connect to the spaces. These post-Shoah, post-Jewish spaces and places, they mirror, and here you see images from the Hijar Synagogue before and after the renovation. So you see layers and layers in these Jewish heritage places from Jewish life. You see destruction time and again and reconstruction, but you also see resilience to create Jewish life there time and again, to come back or to stay and create the place anew. In the post-Shoah Jewish places, you often need discovering, because you don't know each and every heritage, Jewish heritage place, you need preservation. So you need experts, and you also need to have concepts of an adaptive reuse without somehow like a misuse of these places. And in the best way, if you don't have a Jewish community, you always create a space for encounters and for these today's cross-cultural exchanges. So if we look at the Worms Synagogue from 1034 to today, what we see first is an architectural icon, because after this first or the second synagogue, which was built after the Crusades in the 12th century, it was somehow like a role model or prototype for synagogues in Europe, from Vienna, from Krakow to Prague to many other synagogues, which were set up like a small warm synagogue somewhere else. What you also have there is the reconstruction and the resilience as well, which I was touching upon before. So you have like 4 times of destruction before the Nazi era in the Worms Synagogue, and it was rebuilt time and again at the same place, and the community didn't leave. So you have like a Jewish tradition of 900 years before the Holocaust, which was somehow like a nearly unbroken tradition. And this mirrors Jewish life much more than talking about victims and persecution. And you also, so you have the whole Jewish history in Germany and also in Europe in this small synagogue, which is a very decent building. And you also have the Holocaust and the post-Shoah debates. Can you create a space of Jewish life in a space where you don't have a Jewish community? And all these debates were also reflected in the UNESCO application, it's also reflected in the UNESCO inscription of the Shum sites in 2021, because it was somehow said it's not only a prototype, but you also have this long Jewish tradition, and you have again since 20 years a flourishing Jewish community in Mainz, which is also part of the, or it's the owner of the synagogue in Worms. So you have these many layers, and you have mirrored the whole, I would say, the whole Jewish history in Germany in one building. And this is very important or of huge value for education. When we look at the Jubilee in 1934, it was 900 years of the Worms Synagogue. And I like this quote: "A covenant was created between this space and fatherland, between home, country, and spirituality. This is the spirit of Worms." And this was the head of the Jewish community of whole Germany then, Dr. Leo Beck. But 4 years after this quote, the synagogue was burned down and turned into rubble. But you see here in this quote what this building meant for the Jewish community in Germany. When we look after the Shoah, it was rebuilt between 1957 and 1961, but it was then a synagogue without a community. It was mainly politics, but it was also rebuilt not as a mirror or the real reconstruction of the synagogue of 1934. It was really back then, somehow like adapted, because the women's part of the synagogue was then turned into a remembrance hall and a room where exhibitions and festivities of today's community take place. So it's somehow split up into a synagogue now and in a room within the synagogue, which mirrors the whole history. And it was not free of huge debates, because many survivors and emigres from Worms said, how can you rebuild a synagogue without a community? So it was also a very German debate, in my opinion, perhaps the first German historians debate post-Shoah. And then you have in Worms the intangible heritage connected to the synagogue. So you have the great Jewish scholar Rashi, who was there and who left traces there, intangible traces. And you have the women's spaces, so you have the women's part in the synagogue, you have the huge mikveh, and you have all these spaces where Jewish women somehow were much more emancipated than perhaps in the 17th century, but we speak here from the 12th and 13th century. And the whole history was then packed into a very small museum in Worms in 1924. And the history of this museum, and that it was then somehow like the treasure trove of the Worms community, and it reflected the proudness and the attachment to the homeland, to the fatherland of Germany and the home country of Worms, is very touching. And it talks about the huge abyss which was opened by the Shoah. And you can mirror this not only in the Worms synagogue, but also in a book which was somehow taken each and every day to the Worms synagogue, the Mahzor of Worms, the prayer book of Worms, which was illustrated in Würzburg, came to Worms in the 13th century, and was used up to 1933 in the Worms synagogue each and every day for each festivity. And it survived pogroms, it survived the Shoah, and then it was turned to Israel as a somehow like homeless Jewish heritage. So you see, like this book on the move, it also mirrors everything which you have in Jewish life. And it's much more Jewish life than persecution and the Holocaust. Also attached to the Worms synagogue, it's the golem figure made from letters, numbers, and clay. And this legend started in Worms, and this myth of the powerful figure started in Worms, created by a great rabbi of the family of Kalonimos, after his wife and daughters were murdered in the 12th century. And he created this idea of a figure of protection, perhaps also of revenge and resilience. So it's also that you have not only someone who was a victim, but you have someone who reacted. And this is also Jewish life, not a passive victim. And if you look at the figure of Golem, you have the whole pop culture in there, from songs to films to movies, up to Superman in the 1940s, created by Jewish illustrators, and in the US, reacting to the Holocaust. So you have here this trying to be powerful, to have reaction, and to have also, to be not a silent victim. This started in Worms as well. So if you look at this 1,000 years of Jewish history, you can also talk with people who have ancestors in the family of the founding fathers of the Kalonimos family from Italy and Greece and Holy Land. And we interviewed Jonathan Kalmanovic, who is by his name a member of the family of Kalonimos. And he discovered his roots in the Shum cities 1,000 years after the communities were established. So he also tried to reflect not only on persecution, but on survival, on traditions, and how to somehow like foster this Jewish tradition today as a descendant of this family. And if you know that the Kalonimos family had poets and you would today say songwriters, he's a poet and a songwriter. And he didn't know about this connection up to like 5 years ago. So we need to educate and present, we need to connect people to the places, and we need to be responsible with the heritage we have. We need to be careful. And so we can share heritage and we can share values, not only from the Jewish heritage, but also European values. And for this, we need empathy. We need these spaces where we can meet and share memory, history, and heritage. And so we need to connect people. And it's a Jewish tradition. You need to tell stories, because the Jewish tradition on Pesach, on Passover, what we have next week, we tell stories from very, very long ago. And this is something in the Jewish tradition we can also do with or promote in the Jewish heritage places, to tell stories, to make this Jewish tradition of telling stories and put it into, today, and to have this tradition very lively. This was my tour de force, and I thank you for your attention.
Well, that's terrific, Susanne. Thank you so much. I've got a few questions, but I'll hold for now as we turn away from Germany and travel to Spain. And let me introduce Dr. Lucia Conte, who's also a member of Moreshet. She's the project manager of the Utopia European University Alliance at the University of Pompea Fabra. Pompea Fabra, is that close enough? That's close enough. Close enough. Slight Scottish accent there, I know it's.
Of course.
So this involves managing the EU-funded Utopia More project with the participation of 10 partners. At the university, she also teaches on Spanish Jewish history and researches the history of Jews in medieval and modern times in the Crown of Aragon and the history of early Hebrew printing. And her passion is the medieval synagogue of Hijar. Over to you, Lucia.
Okay, thank you very much, Michael and all. I am very pleased to be sitting virtually in a panel with the panelists that I'm honored to be discussing with today. So thanks everybody for coming and for having this opportunity to reflect a little bit further on the work we are doing to propose a recovery project for the synagogue of Hijar from the particular perspective of how this can be a tool to combat anti-Semitism and to foster Jewish life. Because we're going on such a project, we're working on it with the Foundation of Jewish Heritage and the municipality of Hijar. And for all the parties involved in this project, is very fundamental to emphasize how heritage in general, and in this case, Jewish heritage in particular, relates to human rights and democracy. So in my presentation, what I will do is to essentially give some examples, very practical, on the type of questions we have asked ourselves when designing a master plan for the future of the synagogue of Hijar regarding to this issue of anti-Semitism. But let me first brief or minimum on the elements of Hijar Jewish heritage that will be like the ones sustaining this process. So this is Hijar, a small town in the middle of the Spanish countryside in the region of Aragon, where a Jewish community settled in around the 13th century, more or less, until the expulsion of the Jews from Spain. If you stroll around the streets of the Jewish quarter in Hijar today, you still can see this elliptical, evocative square, the few little narrow streets around conforming the Jewish quarter, and the synagogue standing in a prominent position in this place. This synagogue was built, as I said, in the 14th century. What you see in the image on the right-hand side of the slide is the synagogue of Hijar, like 10 years ago or so, when it was before the recent excavations and the recent restoration. It was used as a Catholic chapel since 1524. So after the expulsion of the Jews, the former properties of the Jewish community were given, in this case, to the Franciscan order, and it was considered a chapel for centuries. Only very recently, archaeological excavations proved that this was actually the medieval synagogue of Hijar. No? The discoveries presented the podium for the Bima, for the reading of the Torah, and the archaeologists also found an ejal, the ark for the scrolls, and several other structures, culminating in a second excavation with these unique medieval wall paintings that depict Jewish and Christian symbols and iconography, including a menorah or an inscription in Hebrew, probably from the Psalms, which make this an exceptional discovery and a site that's truly unique in all of Spain. No? So besides that, Hijar also has an interesting piece of intangible heritage, which is the legacy of the pioneering early Hebrew printing in Spain and Portugal in the what it was called Separat back then. And I brought some images of the most beautifully Hebrew incunabula printed in Spain ever, which are the ones from this town where my parents were born. So the project will delve around three main elements: the synagogue, the legacy of the printing house, and also the people, because there is a lot of documentation about the medieval Jews from Hijar. And around these three elements, we propose the creation of the synagogue of a heritage center. But then, now, if we want it to be a vital, modern center for intercultural dialogue and exchange, if we wanted to contribute to make Jewish culture and Jewish experience more widely understood, appreciated, and celebrated in Spain, well, there are some things we have to wonder. We are working on like four main pillars: a touristic one, a cultural one, the educational, and the digital. Certainly, for the purpose of today's discussion, the educational one is the most important. So that's why I highlighted. But this kind of cloud of words that you see on the slide represent the inspirational words that we have been working on to design the food plan. The idea is that cultural heritage goes beyond preservation, so we want it to bridge, in the case of Hijar, the gap between history and today's society. And this gap is wide in the Spanish case. So there is, the Spanish society has been almost alien to the presence of Jewish people for centuries. And this creates some issues in our point of view. For example, how can we use the site-specific heritage, in this case, a medieval synagogue and a medieval people and medieval pogroms and medieval acculturation and medieval destruction of Jewish heritage, such as censorship of Hebrew books, for example. How can we use that in a way that effectively connects with present-day society, that effectively creates significant ties, that it appeals and calls to the citizens of today? How can they embrace a responsibility or accept a need of reparation for certain things that are so distant in time? So this is a challenge that we have in Spain and other Mediterranean countries that I think it's interesting, because it's not exactly the same story that we have in other Jewish heritage sites in Central Europe or Eastern Europe, for example, where the presence of Jewish communities is very recent, or still is, to say it clearly, no? So we think that to inspire this kind of revisited version of the narratives that the Spanish projects have had. No? There are more than 30 years of experiences of Jewish heritage recovery projects going on in Spain, but now the approach to Jewish heritage is different. And there are certain things that have shaped the vision of Jewish heritage in Spain, that today we want to present something different in Hijar that perhaps can serve as a model to break this ignorance of the Jewish past and the stereotypes. So we think that having such a big void of 500 years from the culture you want to present in this particular case, when there is a void, you can feel it easily with anything. And that's the problem. When you fill it with stereotypes, with preconceptions, with anti-Semitic stereotypes, why not to say it like that, but not with the connection with the real stories of the real people. We also think that it's important to use these real people because it is harder to hate a real person than to hate a stereotype. Bringing the real people, perhaps this current citizens of Hijar or the today's visitors going to take part on the programs that this synagogue may incorporate, these people might find a connection, even family connection, why not, personally connection. They can interpret the values and find common values, for example. So if that's how I think that presenting Jewish heritage in Hijar in a very intentional way can be used as a tool for empathy with the audience, but also as a tool to prevent stereotyping and to prevent anti-Semitism. A special attention deserves the issue of the Holocaust, and this is a discussion we have had in thinking about this project, because traditionally Spain as a whole has projected this image of the neutral country for decades, has presented itself as a nation alien to the Holocaust. So the Shoah is a subject of a study universally recognized as a crucial dimension of the European history. But in Spain, it has been kind of very nicely taken apart. So most heritage projects in Spain do not recognize the Holocaust. So the other question is, shall we? If we want to make this site specific in a town that has only Jewish medieval heritage, how can we bridge this gap? How can we make this more recent topic of the Jewish history be relevant as well in a place that there is no material evidence? But if there is a Jewish heritage center, shouldn't it be Jewish intangible heritage present in anyone? So if we want to do this in a sensitive way to the Jewish people and to the Jewish culture, can we skip this idea? So we propose that this center becomes a place also with a permanent dedicated space to give the Spanish and Aragonese context of the Holocaust, because there was a context. There is people who, like Marc Chagall, Alma Mahler, for example, or Hannah Arendt or Walter Benjamin, who crossed the Pyrenees to escape from the Shoah. And these are interesting stories to tell, and they reach our lands. So perhaps just at least providing this context can make this Hijar Heritage Center the first body in the region of Aragon addressing everything that's Jewish, and not only the medieval past, which also can tell stories of resilience, as Susanne just mentioned. No, it's not just victimizing ourselves. We will not obliterate or obscure the negative passageways of medieval history in Hijar, which is something we have to face and address if we want to take, again, responsibility and reparation. But there are very interesting episodes of resilience as well. Perhaps you didn't know, but there's only once that someone has killed an inquisitor to protest by forced conversions and killing of Jews, and this was in Zaragoza. It seems that there was a complot led by a guy whose family was from Hijar, for example. So there are these stories of resilience. I don't know if killing an inquisitor can be considered a positive event, but in any case, it's a story of resilience, no? So I don't know, I think we don't have much time, so I wanted just to throw these ideas to share with you the kind of reflections that we have in this cradle process, because it's in the cradle, the project now, and we have the opportunity ahead of us to use this narrative, use these principles that are guiding our reflection to align the Synagogue of Hijar with the Council of Europe interest in promoting these fundamental European values of human rights, cultural diversity, intercultural dialogue, and bringing Jewish heritage closer to the European citizens. This is why we also, and finally, present a project where the Jewish communities in Spain are important stakeholders, because it's time for Jewish people and Jewish sensitivity to be also part of a Jewish heritage project, which is it will be something pretty new in Spain. And as Samuel Gruber wrote, Jewish heritage can be a powerful tool to strengthen Jewish identification and to promote the idea of Judaism has its place in present-day society, even if there are no Jews in a given place. But it can be also a way to help Spanish Jews of today reinterpret their past and shape their identity. Okay, so this is how we are thinking about promoting a project that helps both combat anti-Semitism and foster Jewish life in Europe. Thank you.
Okay, well, listen, thank you, Lucia. That was fantastic, and thank you, Susanne. Two terrific presentations on two specific case studies, looking at Jewish heritage and its contemporary impact, and that's how it links to the earlier presentations around this the EU initiative. So we're now going to open up for a final round of questions, either to Susanne or Lucia, or indeed if people want to raise any questions from the earlier two presentations, we'd also welcome that. So do we have any hands up?
No, we don't have hands up at the moment.
There's no hands up. I do know that we have gone over slightly our allotted time. I don't know if people had to leave us. So I didn't realize, Susanne, about the golem. So everyone's been thinking of the golem as a Prague story, and you're telling us that it began in Worms. Is that the case?
Yes. It was Rabbi Elazar Kalonimus, and his wife and his two daughters were murdered by crusaders. And shortly after this, he started to comment on a book, the Book of Creation, Sefer Yetzirah. And there he somehow like sketched down, okay, you need numbers, you need clay, you need letters, and then you can create something. Yes. And from his idea, it went to Rabbi Löw to Prague, and it was really like from there going to pop culture, and still movies are not the golem, but it's somehow this idea of something that helps you, rescues you, and is somehow like a tool of defiance. Yeah. I think it's interesting to connect this to the Jewish alley in Worms, where you walked, Michael.
No, the golem, as you say, has become a major cultural icon, a European icon. It was a Jewish icon. Fascinating. Now, do we have any questions that anyone would like to put either to Lucia or to Susanne, or any issues they want to raise from the previous two questions? Pascale may be with us. I know that Felix mentioned in the chat they had to leave us. Is Pascale, she may have also left us, I think. No, is it? Okay, well, look, that's
if possible, I would like to ask both Lucia and Susanne, because I understand that there is, may I ask a question? Yes?
Yes, yeah.
Okay, so I understand that you have a very thorough program for both places, and I would like to ask how you are covering all your activities. What is the source of your budget? Do you have some instruments that are covering the activities offered by the local authorities, maybe by the central government? How you are functioning concerning the expenses?
okay. Susanne, do you want to go first?
As I'm not anymore in the SHUM sites or in Worms, I was also referring to projects I did do there. And the app on SHUM was the last thing I finished in January, in September last year. But I know that, or I had some like half fundings or half sponsorships and half from the cities or from the association's budget. So it was very low budget projects. But we also did an exhibition. We only had like 100,000 to 20 euro, so it was a really like a small budget, but it worked. So I think you can work with small budgets, but since I'm not there anymore, I don't know what educational projects there are, or if there are any, but I think they work now on visitor centers. I think that's for all three cities. That's what I know now.
Okay, Lucia?
Yes. Thank you. Well, the project has not literally started yet. So one of the things we are doing with the master plan is precisely thinking about where to find sources to fund the project. But some of the possibilities and ideas are, besides, of course, European Union funds and national funds, national Spanish funds, there are many allocated to the region of Teruel where Hijar is, because it's a very small, tiny rural area. And in order to prevent rural exodus, there are funds to create cultural and business innovation things in the area around. So one is just public funds. We can think about private funding as well because of the installation in the area of several renewable energy companies that are using aeolic energy and solar energy and so on, and who have to, by contract, let's say, they have to fund cultural projects in the area they establish their industries as well. So, and of course, we might count on private donors. You are all welcome to donate. So we'll see, because we still need to have this feasibility study done in terms of funding, but these are some of the ideas we're working with.
That's great. Well, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm conscious of time. I know that we are quarter past the agenda.
Okay.
So I'd like to thank you, because I don't see any more questions. So I'd like to thank you, Lucia, as well, and Susan, and especially Susan for organizing the whole event today with inviting all of the guests and putting the agenda all together. I'd like to invite all of our participants today to watch us carefully, to watch the website moreshet.eu carefully, because we are preparing the next event, online event this year, which probably will be either June or or early September. We need to yet to make a decision, but we will contact you by email to invite you to join us for the second Moreshet event this year. Once again, thank you so much for joining us. If you have any more questions, maybe you can also send us an email. Through
One
the
more
Moreshet
question.
website. Yes,
are you going
Mr.
to
Kochman.
record it? I mean, to have it on the website that if somebody was not able to participate, can watch the broadcast from this?
It's published on YouTube, so we will try to make it as a link to be put on our website as well.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, and enjoy the rest of the evening. It was a great pleasure to